Right, we're going to talk a little bit about something I mentioned earlier on, something which is called dangerous instincts. We touched on one of them already. We're going to refresh our memory on that and talk about a couple of other activities. So let's start at the very beginning. What's an instinct? What is understood by an instinct?
Something that you do automatically without really thinking about it.
Right, often called a reflex. Right? Something that you do.
An example of that would be when you're going too fast into a bend, the dangerous instinct is to put the brakes on, and then you discover that you carry on going straight across the bend,
right,
until you let go of everything, and then you can manoeuvre around.
So that's an instinct, right? Yeah. To grab.
Yeah.
What's the problem with instincts?
It's unthinking.
It's unthinking.
You don't think about it, you just do it.
It's the reflex action that takes over. And there are three particularly important dangerous instincts we're going to talk about. One of them is that tendency to roll off the throttle or to brake. I'll come back to that in a second. The first one is target fixation that we talked about earlier this morning, and about how you recognise when target fixation has happened and the need to stop it as soon as you recognise it. And being aware of it happening is probably the fundamental part of that. So before you get to that bit of rolling off the throttle, you may have target fixated. What's the next thing that you do? Before necessarily stiffen up? Yeah. Ever had that experience where you come around a corner too hot, you realise you're going into a bend too hot, or there's something in the road, and it's that instinct to push danger away from you, and your arms become rigid? And what happens to the bike when your arms become rigid?
Straightforward.
The bike becomes very difficult to steer because you're no longer part of the suspension. So the two things that happen almost immediately, one is target fixation. The second thing is that fear, that pushing away from the target that you fixated on. And the important thing is being able to overcome these fixations as soon as they happen so that you can break that cycle. Has anybody ever had an incident where they've had to brake too hard in a corner? Yes. And what happens, Barry?
I'd come off.
So what happened? Tell us the story.
Well, I think we all have the old funk moment, don't we? You know, when we're going in a bit too let's switch this off. When we're going in a bit too hot, you know, and you're looking down at that white line, that target fixation, you're looking at the white line, and then you look where you don't want to go, you know, it's that. So what do you do? Exactly what we've spoken about before, is get that more positive steering, you know, looking up where you want to go. So looking for that exit point. So yeah.
So you come around the corner, and the first automatic reaction is to roll off the throttle. The second is probably to grab the brake. And you mentioned something about what happens then at the bike. What happens to the bike if you?
Well, the bike will stand up and it will go in a straight line.
The bike stands up, and it doesn't, and you start to lose control. Yeah. What are the alternatives to rolling off the throttle and putting on the brake? What's the best? What's an optional strategy?
Chuck it in harder and accelerate.
Expand on that a little bit, Neil. Chuck it in harder and
do that with your neck and do that with your roll and pull yourself round.
Okay. So I think what you're talking about is positive steering.
Positive steering.
We've talked a little bit about already. And the challenge is we're going to get an opportunity to try it out today. The challenge is breaking that habit of grabbing the brakes, rolling off the throttle, and getting your brain to think, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get myself out of this problem by a bit of positive steering. What happens when you push down left-hand bend? What happens when you push harder on the steering? And what happens to the bike? It drops down a couple more degrees, and all of a sudden the bike's in a better position. It's better position to get around the corner. Has anybody made that mental leap physically?
Yeah.
The first time you do it, the first time you realise that you have actual control over positive steering rather than doing it automatically, it is a coming to God moment. You wake up, and then once you've done it, you actually use it proactively rather than waiting for the problem to occur.